Welcome to the 30/30 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello everyone, after a brief hiatus, I am super excited to be back today. My guest today is one of my closest friends in the health space, Dr. Alan Christianson. Dr. Christianson offers a solution to free trapped fat, boost your energy, and heal your gut. He designed the Metabolism Reset Diet based on clinical trials with thousands of patients. On average, participants lost 13 pounds and 2.5 inches from their waists over the course of the 4-week program. My hunch is that you'll be hearing a lot about his liver support protocol in the coming months because he has a new book coming out. If you're interested in getting leaner, losing fat, and optimizing your metabolism, I want to invite you to be my guest on the Metabolism Reset program. You get the first 7 days of his program absolutely free. The only thing you need to do is follow the link under the notes for the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, super excited to be here with my friend, Dr. Alan Christianson. Man, what a week you've had. So what's going on?
Oh boy, just excited about the book and sharing a new message to make life easier for those who've had struggles with their weight and their energy levels.
In true 30/30 health fashion, you have to tell us your hero story before, even though, we know it. But for anyone that's living under a rock that doesn't know who you are, could you tell us how you got to this place?
I will, and there's chapters of this that people have probably not heard before that I'll throw into in a brief way. So overview of the story was that I was an epileptic kid. I had complications from cerebral palsy. And as an adolescent, this all culminated in me being obese and extremely uncoordinated and unable to do physical activities and just unhappy about it. And really to feel, being socially outcast and rejected and stuff. And I had been taken to doctors and they did things that were, I guess, protocol or the expected recommendations, but nothing really helped. And it was just me in a library in Kingman, Arizona. We lived there for a little while, and I would spend most of my time with Carl Sagan's books and Isaac Asimov's work. And then I thought after one day of just like major humiliation in gym class that I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure this out on my own in some way. And whatever reason, I can do a good job reading and understanding hard concepts. So why can I not dive into this world? And so I got some health books, and there was many fewer then, but I read from them and found some things that seemed to be congruent with several and tried stuff. And a lot of things didn't work and some things were not plausible, but some things I did stick with. And over the course of a few years, I saw just what a transition life could have from, becoming, and as an adolescent, I just can't overstate how meaningful your social life is and how you're seen by your peers. That's just everything to us then. So to have that come back from me, and also then to have not so much just frustration and pain, but like physicality, like joy of movement and the pleasure from that, to regain that experience. And then to regain social standing and not to feel like an outcast. And it was huge. And I realized that, health is just like almost everything to happiness and contentment. And also that your data, your habits, that changes your health and you can take control over that.
It's funny that you mentioned how important it is to have like a little bit of a status in high school. In high school and on Facebook, your selfies and how you look are very important. But we forget as adults that not having, or feeling less than because you have a little bit of extra weight or because you don't feel 100% like human sometimes, that can really impact your happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that any push towards getting a little bit of weight off of your body can improve that. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of waist loss, not just weight loss?
Well, that was a big part of my story too, was that I was misshapen. As a kid, I had far too much waist and extra fat, and And then as an adult, I had a window of time in which I was in my first year of practice, and the culmination of medical school and the demands of starting in practice, I lost my momentum on self-care. I also was, some of the injuries from old cerebral palsy problems were mounting, and I couldn't keep up with the training that I wanted to. But my waist blossomed again, and it frustrated me. It's a big thing about just how your profile, it's how you're seen. And now in writing this book, what I've seen is that your waist is probably one of the biggest predictors of your lifespan, and your risk of chronic disease, your brain function, all that. And I've seen numbers say, a man's waist should be less than 36, a woman's less than 34, whatever. But it's tough because, height, that can be misleading. So what I found was a simple thing called the height to waist ratio. And just the simplest thing in the world, grab a tape measure and wake up in the morning, let your belly out and measure around the belly button and compare that to your height. And the magic number is 1/2. Mm-hmm. So you want your waist circumference to be less than half of your height. And for many, it's not. And the main thing that drives that is mass built up within the liver. And the liver itself changes that.
And that's where, the Metabolism Reset Diet comes into play. It's not just a fast weight loss diet. It's like a detoxification, improving your liver, improving, your whole HPA axis, and helping us as practitioners and people reading the book just gain better health, and thus, health is wealth, and getting that status and feeling better about yourself. So how did you decide? Because you're known for thyroid, and I've learned enormous amounts of information this past year working with you at Integrative Health. And then you dug really deep into the adrenals and cortisol management and cortisol dysfunction and HPA axis dysfunction. What led you to this liver and this conundrum that we have with waist to height ratio and weight loss and weight gain?
Yeah, great question. Each year I ask my readers, what are you up to, and what are your biggest goals, and what's been the struggles? And the top themes consistently have been weight and energy. And I think most people have experienced some scenario in which they've done a restrictive diet and they were able to change their weight. But they realized that any wins they had were not long lasting, and also they were at a pretty big price. They probably went worse for it. They felt more tired from it and had more cravings from it. And digging deep into our world of endocrinology and hormones, I want everyone to hear a brand new message about how the body should work, and not to assume that this is just your lot in life, that you've either got to be starving and miserable or feeling good but not at the weight you want, that you really should have both. That's the body's state when it's in balance.
How many people do we see at the office where they are doing those very restrictive diets? And yeah, if you have, severe autoimmune conditions, or you have, or you go into anaphylaxis every time you look at a peanut the wrong way, the gold standard to identify, those things is going to be an elimination diet. But what people forget is to do the second part of that gold standard, which is the reintroduction phase. And we kind of become scared of eating the foods that we should be eating. I have read and I have seen a lot of orthorexia. They get paralyzed if you even, mention going to, I don't know, eat a slice of pizza or something. And that is not healthy.
Yeah. In all those lines, when you were talking about detoxifying the liver, it really went off inside my head that the biggest stress that we face, the thing that ages us the most and causes the most chronic disease, is processing fuel. That's when you're looking at a used car, you check the mileage first and foremost. Yeah. And our mileage is how much fuel we process. And the liver, I would argue that the biggest toxin our liver ever builds up is just the fuel overload. Like the things that create fatty liver and steatohepatitis and cirrhosis. It's too much fuel that we really need to detoxify from. And it's not so much even that there's inherently good or bad foods. There can be for sure, but the biggest threat we face is this fuel overload. And that's the trick. When the liver's healthy, it's got room to manage any spare fuel and hold on to that in harmless ways and then release that out when the body needs it. And that's the connection between weight struggles, and fatigue. When that's not working well, the body can't store fuel in ways that don't lead to weight gain and problems, and it can't release fuel to keep energy up when it would drop otherwise.
And that's what we see happening when you put all your eggs in one basket, when you're either just eating nothing but sugar or, eating nothing but fat. You are only using one macronutrient as fuel source, and then you are no longer metabolically flexible. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we need to be metabolically flexible?
For sure. So people talk about their body composition, and most of us have a vague idea about body fat percentages for what we should be. Men are pretty lean, under 10%, and women probably like 15, 17% is they're lean below that. But your liver's skinnier. So 5% fat for your liver, that's fatty liver syndrome. So a healthy liver is like 1-2%, somewhere around there. But that little bit of overload harms it. And the liver stores fat in a form called triglycerides. That's one of its energy stores. And you can make triglycerides out of any source of energy. So that could be even alcohol. That could be dietary fat. That could be ketone supplements. That could be any type of carbohydrate. Those can all be made into triglyceride. And triglyceride is super, super dense. It doesn't take up a lot of room. It has a lot of fuel that it can give off. And you can put a lot of it in your liver. You can even overload the compartment, so to speak. The other type of fuel is glycogen. And glycogen is only made from carbohydrate. We can't make glycogen from any other fuel type like we can with triglyceride. So overflow carbs, if there's enough glycogen, can make triglyceride. But fat can never make glycogen, nor can ketones, nor can alcohol. And the pitfall is that your liver needs glycogen to burn its stored fat. And so it commonly reaches a state to where it's out of glycogen and it's completely overfilled with triglycerides. And that's when you've lost metabolic flexibility. That's when your body can't easily store any extra fuel and can't draw it out to keep the lights on when the power goes off.
When you're talking about, this syndrome where you're not burning the excess fuel or you're accumulating so much energy that your liver decides, okay, we're going to stop making glycogen. We need a longer storage form, more branched and more dense. Let's start making triglycerides. How can someone know, maybe with labs or maybe with testing, when they're approaching that level?
Yeah, a couple things. The easiest one is that height to weight ratio. So that's one clue for that. And people are often surprised, but the biggest variable about waist circumference is the liver mass. So as the liver starts to get too full or too fat, it gets bigger. And you often see pictures where the liver is on the right side of your abdomen, but it's all the way across and it's huge. And when it's larger, everything is bigger. So that's one way. The other way you can know about that is when you have that conundrum of energy and weight, to where the only way you lose weight is to eat so little you feel miserable. So that's a clear sign that your body can't do backup sources of energy like it should.
So basically, if for more the savvy listeners, if you're looking at your at a CBC or
Sure.
or your lipid panel, do you at any point look at how much do you have a level for your A1C that you want to see, or your triglycerides? Because for sure, if you go too low on your A1C, then there's problems too. You want to have a good glycerol to triglycerol ratio. So what numbers are you looking at when you see a patient and you see these syndromes?
There's certainly concerns about too low, and I'll welcome your comments on that. I guess I don't see too low quite as commonly.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Unless people are very afraid of carbohydrates and now that they feel like crap. They have no cortisol regulation. They you need insulin in order to convert T4 to T3, so their TSH is through the roof. And then you see their A1C and they're really proud about a 4.2, and I'm
wow.
Well, no,
not a good thing.
Not a good thing.
So that's certainly relevant. Two things that are highly diagnostic and specific would be the ratio of HDL to triglycerides. So the protective cholesterol and the triglycerides I talked about before, they're the same things that floating in the bloodstream. So when there's too much in the liver, the extra just spills out and the liver leaks that. So when you're seeing triglycerides more than threefold above HDL, that's a sign of a problem. One of the more specific things to the liver would be just ALT scores. So if someone gets even the most rudimentary blood tests, they generally get a chemistry panel, and most of these include liver function tests. And one of those is the ALT. And this is an enzyme that's unique to liver cells. And liver cells normally die and get replaced. So when they do, they spill this enzyme into the bloodstream. And this is a bizarre one because you can be well within inside of normal, but still be at a level that all experts agree is not healthy. So for women, labs might say you're normal up to 45 or 63 or somewhere like that. But if you're above 19, all liver specialists say that's not right. There's something wrong. And it may not be this fatty liver. It could be hepatitis or a medication reaction. But barring some other explanation, this is the main culprit, is that harm of extra fuel in the liver.
It's, you fell right into my trap because we do trainings with Dr. C and we get together and we just geek out on this stuff. And when he was giving us this information, I've started paying extra attention to these liver enzymes.
How common is it, huh?
Very common. It's rare to see below 25. Unless you have someone that is really healthy, unless you have someone that has been, doing, being very careful and being very proactive with their health. And then you do see those 17s and those 16s numbers. But, I've been looking at this actively. I tend to see above 25.
So you're interviewing me. Let me just flip this for 1 second. So when you do see it above 19 and you're talking to someone, how often are they just blindsided by this?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. And that's when we start looking at what's going on, and it could be, like you said, there could be a couple of problems with medications. People with like Graves' disease might be taking methimazole, and that can be rough on your liver enzymes. But more than likely, you lose those 5-10 pounds. It's not even that much. And those numbers start to reverse.
Well, and that's the exciting thing about finding the liver as, I guess, the culprit, is that it's something that you can fix. You can change it so radically. I'm looking around for props. A gram is something about like the mass of a paper clip. So everyone has a sense about, if you've got a paper clip in your hand, you could feel the heft of that. And there's not much to it. So think about 2 paper clips. So that's about the mass of inter-organ fat that separates a diabetic from a non-diabetic. We've talked for a long time about belly fat. I think everyone's heard to death about the dangers of belly fat. That's not a surprise, but there's a subtype that's much more significant called the organ fat. And 2 paper clips worth of mass within the liver and the pancreas, getting that out is moving back to non-diabetes and 15 to 17 more years back on your lifespan from getting rid of those couple of grams. So it's an awesome change, and it's certainly possible.
An easy way of losing weight is just to starve yourself. It's not going to be a long-term solution. But what if someone came up with a way of losing weight without being hungry, improving your HPA axis, and not sacrificing the conversion of T3 to T4? And that's where the beauty of this book comes into play, because usually when we see different, diets or crash courses, or, maybe these ideas are not put forward by someone that has their finger on the pulse of endocrinology. Sure, you can cut carbs and you will lose fat, but what about all the people that need those insulin spikes to have proper thyroid function? Sure, you can cut calories, but what about someone that has HPA dysfunction, that is so stressed out, maybe an elite athlete or a CEO of a company, and they can't afford to have low days? So how did you stumble upon this idea of using a combination of protein and resistant starch to help bring you back to metabolic flexibility?
I guess it's evolved from a lot of things. Some of the earlier ideas were the Newcastle studies on diabetes. And just to clarify too, the main purpose of this first was managing diabetes and reversing that. And then we saw the side benefits of just effective weight loss, and that was easier to maintain, easier to get through. So the Newcastle studies, they did liquid-only diets comprised of 600 calories for 8 weeks. And that was tough, but some people did it, and they showed via CT scan that the pancreas could structurally change and they could actually reverse diabetes. And before then, we didn't think that was possible. So I first saw that and was impressed and saw that I could achieve similar results by doing similar things with patients. They were very happy about that. But I kept thinking about, the data on long-term effects and what happens if you restrict food too much too long, and how does that play out afterwards? And then I thought a lot about just muscle preservation and how that was a big marker relevant to how dieting played out long-term. How can we hold on to the muscle mass? And then also about just glycemic regulation. So for many people, their limit is their cravings, their hunger. And the hunger is not always lack of food, it's just lack of stable blood sugar and strong signaling to raise blood sugar. So that made me want to pull in resistant starch and more protein. And then also, I guess I would think about the pitfalls about quick weight loss, which can be things like gout or gallstones. So I wanted to do it in a way that could preserve and stress fewer of the body's pH buffering mechanisms along the way. So yeah, plant-based proteins to offset some of those risks of fast loss, and high quantities of good proteins. The protein levels of the diet wouldn't change from a baseline diet, so you could hold on to lean mass. And then also I included some micro workouts, so you weren't really exerting yourself and burning a lot of fuel, but you were keeping your muscles stimulated. And then the resistant starch to keep the blood sugar smoother and keep more of those cravings at bay and help the gut flora along the way.
So do you see a lot of people that overdo it with exercise?
Well, yes and no. So in the 4-week process, I encourage to really minimize exercise. I see a lot of concerns about overtraining, and I would argue that it's completely relative to someone's personal history of exercise. It's very easy to jump in and do a lot and do more than one can tolerate. But if you're changing your amount of activity by about 5-10% per week, that's not unreasonable. And you could get to a place where you're quite active and you're thriving and sleeping well and getting a good immune response. So yeah,
it's funny because there is a lot of maybe like scary talk about, you're gonna crash your hormones if you overexercise, and to a certain extent that is true if you are overexercising for your levels.
Mm-hmm. If you're not used to it, if you're not properly refueling and recovering, my coach is saying there's no such thing as overtraining. There's only under recovering.
Yeah. And walk us through the diet, or walk us through the process of going to this metabolism reset. Where does, who is this for? What does it consist on? Because it's super difficult. And that's another thing, that, and I do want to point out before you explain to us, you made it so simple for anyone, because, we have this goal of changing the world with our practice. But sometimes, the world can't fly to Scottsdale, Arizona. You've made it for the masses and just so simple and so easy to do. What are the steps and how can people start, and who is this for and who is this not for?
So who is this for? That's an easy one to start with. It's for someone who's not been able to get the weight they want and have that stay steady. It's just quite simply. It's not for someone who's pregnant or nursing or unstable in their health in some way. And it's not for someone who's attached to the idea of being on a diet for long term. So some people like the idea of being able to no longer be dieters. So it's a good fit for them. And how it works, I'll give the overview and a few more details afterward for those that are curious. It's thank you so much. I wanted to make it simple and easy because that's how things work if they make sense and they're doable. I have professionals that I talk to, and I don't want to know the nth degree of why they have their expertise. I just want to know what I need to do. So that's what I made this so you got both. So the part about the main action steps are just doing 2 shakes, 1 meal, and then veggies for snacks is what it boils down to.
That's it. And there's no magic. It's all scientifically based. But there is some magic in the formulation of the protein plus the resistant starch. But you're so open about this. You give examples on how to achieve those things without having to go out and buy a shake. Although, if you're lazy like me, it's easy just to grab a shake and put it on a container. But what are some good sources of protein? What are some good sources of the resistant starch? And then why is it 4 weeks? And what do you mean with like shake and meal?
Shake, shake, and meal is just that, a shake for breakfast, a shake for lunch, and a meal for dinner. And there's some reasons in terms of the cortisol cycle and also in terms of the glycemic response, why it's timed out that way. And the meal is one to where there's some good carbs, there's healthy proteins, good fats, lots of veggies, so it's pretty well rounded. And it's all made to where you don't even have to go to like a fancy health food grocery store. You can hit any random grocery store and get the ingredients that will work for this. Examples of good protein. I encourage plant-derived protein for the mainstay. There's a trade-off in quality. There are some animal proteins that if you base the bulk of it on, you could use a bit less of. They can be better quality, but I wanted it to be more pH neutral, so I used a mixture of them, and more so animal proteins for the meal, apart from those who might be vegan, and then a guidance to prefer plant proteins for the shakes. And pea protein is my favorite option that way. Backup would be for those who are not sensitive to use more dairy-derived proteins, but the real mainstay would be pea protein. And in terms of resistant starch, food quantities have a diversity. There's a short list of foods that are the highest in that, and that's going to be the boiled potatoes, the white beans, bananas, and plantains when they're not overripe. A lot of other foods have some resistant starch, but not in quantities that are easy to get up to the real therapeutic targets. So those are the big sources of it.
And what are the therapeutic targets that you're aiming for?
Well, ideally 20,000 milligrams per day, which takes a couple servings of the highest sources like that from foods. We're also just releasing a supplement, a resistant starch supplement, which I'm super excited about that. You can just buy things like Bob's Red Mill unmodified potato starch on Amazon, but the drawback is it's not standardized for resistant starch. And you might have 2% or you might have 80% or somewhere in between.
That's a big problem in because it's an organic thing, and maybe potatoes from Idaho are gonna differ from bananas from Brazil. And if we're just doing the potato flour or the starch, there is no quantification because you don't need to quantify the amount of potato starch you need to make a gluten-free cake or whatever,
right.
But we're talking about a therapeutic food. Yeah. And we do want to have a certain target so your blood sugar regulation stays even.
The other exciting thing about that, the term that's comes up a lot is bacterial translocation. And that's like a way of describing the leaky gut phenomena to where things that should not enter the bloodstream do enter the bloodstream. And I'm finding all this data about the gut bile axis and about how the quantity, but also the properties of bile have completely differing effects upon how readily bacteria translocate. So it turns out that you can acquire leaky gut because your liver is not secreting bile in the ways that it should. And one of the big reasons that it can't is because your liver is too jammed full of fuel and it can't carry out its functions properly. So as bile gets healthier, that itself reverses leaky gut and cures that. And then if you have something like resistant starch that speeds the process, then that takes more strain off the liver. There's less bacterial translocation the liver has to process and deal with.
You are not what you eat, you are what you absorb. And even though you're eating starch, your gut bacteria is transforming it and you are actually absorbing something else, and it does create butyrate and it creates all these fatty acids that help you fuel yourself at a very steady pace. And it's completely different than just taking, agave syrup or, even though it's a carbohydrate, it's different. We're looking at the label of this new product that Dr. C designed. And we decided that it's vegan, paleo, keto, and AIP, because it's
I should distinguish that one, clarify that one really quick, because that could be a confusing point. So it has potato. The concern about potato are various alkaloids that are from nightshades like solanine and chalconine. So this extract is purified and it has no alkaloids. So it's just not relevant.
And it feeds your gut bacteria, and we know that the gut rules it all. So once this product hits the market, it's gonna be a game changer, because now if you prefer, like maybe you have you don't want to do pea protein and you want to do like a hydro beef,
sure,
you can just add it to your hydro beef.
Exactly.
Or if you really like a whey protein because it keeps you satiated longer, or casein, now you can do this, and now you can be part of this weight loss revolution and help you become more metabolically flexible.
I'm so jazzed. And at the time of this recording, just to tell you this update now as of this morning, it's being shipped. So
That's awesome.
So the first things I'll be playing with in the kitchen. And yeah, if someone's not dairy sensitive, you could, or even if they are, you could do yogurts. You can do non-dairy yogurts and you can make it into a pudding.
Can you talk about like this discovery of Sigley's you made? Because I've been, like this fermented dairy because I'm loving it.
Well, it's an Icelandic yogurt, and they've got the drinkable yogurt and also regular yogurt, and it's a traditional Scandinavian food. There's been so much debate about the Scandinavian diet as of late, and the debates are, does it rival the Mediterranean diet as far as the benefit and the outcome? And I don't know if there's a real rival or a clear winner, but there's just some more good food options from those traditions, and that's one of them.
I like to say that, not all of us evolved in the blue zones. Not all of us, so I had this thought, while I was in medical school that, you didn't have to be born in China and have traditional Chinese medicine to be healthy. You could be born in Arizona and there's amazing plants and different things that are happening in the Arizona desert that rival the power of traditional Chinese medicine. So we are very resilient and there are various healthy foods all over the world that we should be incorporating and not be scared of trying out because there is a rule somewhere that says that you shouldn't be eating it because X, Y, Z.
Well, the sad thing is it's not even about what's right or wrong, but how do you arrive at the decisions? And if you arrive at the decision because of a theory, because of a speculation of harm, if you open up data at that level, there are no safe foods. There is not a single food that you can't find some way to speculate would be bad for you.
Yeah, and we see this. We are scared of oxalates and we are scared of nightshades and we're scared of something being GMO or something being there is so much food fear. And I think that because of the population that we work with, we try to make people kind of forget about this fear and this phobia. Maybe almonds are not good for you. Maybe you have a reaction to them, but that doesn't mean that you need to limit yourself for the rest of your life. There are so many things that you could be adding to your life that in the more foods that you eat, the more diversity in your intestinal flora you're going to have, and the healthier and happier you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the protein will help you keep you satiated. Mm-hmm. The resistant starch is going to prevent those dips in your blood glucose, and then that lean and green meal that is going to be very balanced is going to help you avoid sometimes when you go into a diet you can have a lot of like social pressures and you can get a salad pretty much anywhere. Yeah. Okay, what can people expect week to week as they go through this, and how long is this diet for?
Yeah, I intentionally made this 28 days, and there's data arguing that if you're more than about 6 weeks of significant food restriction, you can have your metabolism impaired. But if you're staying well short of that and you do things right like we've done, that's not an issue and not a concern. And what to expect, there's a change going on. Your body is transforming. You're going from being in a mode of not able to tap into your energy to rebooting all that and shifting it. So there are some changes, and I just want to have someone own that and know that it's not how they should live their lives for long term. I encourage during those 28 days to have it work best, have them also off of sugar and alcohol and caffeine, so it's easier for the liver. And most notice the first couple of days being a transition. Just put it out there. They can be more tired or hungrier or not feeling their sharpest. But typically within the half to the end of the first week, people are surprised about not having much for cravings and having good energy and better mental clarity, and most are noticing better digestion. There are those who go into it who didn't have much for variety in their diet, and they do notice for a week or so that they're still getting transition, still getting some bloating or irregularity. But by and large, by the third or fourth week, and that's also resolved, and they're seeing just better, easier stools and flatter stomach and broader range of foods. So yeah, it's a pretty easy process for people.
Now, for people that are scared of resistant starch, because I have read a couple of things on on how it can bloat you, and do you have anything to say about that?
For sure. Yeah. So two things can happen. There was one group of studies on pigs, actually, and they showed that if you do mega doses of purified resistant starch in the absence of foods, that you theoretically could change the first part of the colon at the expense of the latter parts of the colon. So part of it gets ignored. But when it's done in the context of foods and diets, that's really a non-issue. As far as bloating goes, anytime you shift fiber intake, that can occur short term. This has been studied a lot for things like fiber supplements, and resistant starch can do that. It's a lot milder than really regular fiber supplements are for those purposes. So those that do have symptoms, it's not really an incompatibility. It's more so just a lack of healthy flora. And the options are, it's like, how do you like to take off your Band-Aids? Do you want to take it slowly and over time, or you want to just snap it off? So it's personal preference. Some can do a teaspoon dose for daily for a couple of weeks and then do it regularly. Others just tear the Band-Aid off and do a full dose and let the symptoms pass after a few days and be done with it.
And that's going to give you a little bit more flora diversity.
Yeah, so leaky gut, colorectal cancer risk, nutrient assimilation, mineral absorption, proper gut immunity, blood sugar regulation. These are all things that by magnitudes of order, resistant starch helps more than almost any other element of the diet can.
How long have you been doing, these clinical trials, and how long have you been helping people with this type of diet?
Well, this particular version, probably the earliest iteration, started in about 2011. We've been evolving this since then and refining it into its current form.
And what are some things that you've seen with your patients? Because I've seen some patients, but I want you to talk about some of the things you've seen.
It's been awesome. One story that sticks out in my head was a woman that was pre-diabetic and struggled with weight. She wanted to do it for weight purposes. I wanted to do it for diabetic purposes too. And this was when we were launching one of the clinical trials. And she said, "Hey, Dr. C, I don't think I should do this. I'm going to be on a cruise. And I'm afraid that I'll give you bad numbers for your clinical trial because I'll be on a cruise and there's like food everywhere and I won't have control of things." And I said, "Look, I want you to do it. I want to give you some coaching and some insights." And what she experienced was what many did, is that we always think there's got to be a perfect time, but when it's really simple, it's even easier to do it, even if life does have complications. So she just packed her shakes that were pre-made in a shaker bottle, and she had enough for one for breakfast and lunch for the whole cruise. And then each evening she had a meal that had some healthy, good carbs, like the potatoes or some beans or some brown rice, some lean protein, some lean meat, some fish, some chicken, whatever else, and lots of veggies. And she just stuck with that. And over the course of the cruise, I can show you the numbers. Her waist reduction was 5.5 inches.
Jeez.
Now, she had a larger goal to achieve, so she had more to go. But yeah, she was down over 5 inches. She came back from her cruise non-diabetic, going on to it pre-diabetic.
and that's the beauty of this, because we can talk for many hours about this, about the difficulty of weight loss and dieting and decision fatigue, because there are some patients that I see that have been doing a very restrictive diet for a very long time, and you can throw whatever okay, you're gonna eat only foods that start with T, and they will do it, and they'll thrive on that. But sometimes there's so much misinformation, and we have patients that have tried it all and they don't know what to do anymore, and they are tearful and they're sad, and they just want something that is simple, that is not forever. Can you talk a little bit about decision fatigue and why that is such a key component?
Yeah, and that's a great point. It seems that the more things you've got to figure out, the less energy you've got to figure things out.
Yeah.
So I wanted this to be so simple. And the shake meal, even that doesn't convey quite the level of simplicity, because I encourage people to make a giant shake for breakfast and have half of that for lunch. So it's even that much easier.
Yeah.
So you make basically one meal for half of the day and then one evening meal. And the whole work time should be no more than 10 minutes. And I've given outlines in the book to where someone, I call them meal assembly guides, to where someone can just take what they've got and put it together. we've also put some awesome kitchen tested recipes. You've had a lot of these meals.
It's fantastic.
So for those that want to just like completely color by numbers, you can do that too. And it's all ready to go and no big decisions to make.
Because, if you wake up, and you can try this next time, and if someone asks you, what would you like for dinner? First thing in the morning, you'll probably, oh, you know what, I'm feeling, whatever. As the day progresses and it's 7 o'clock in the afternoon and you're walking through your, and you see your wife or your husband and they say, what do you want for dinner? You're going to snap back with, whatever you want, you decide. But if we can give you a plan that, 66% of your meals have already been planned. Now 33% of your meals for 28 days is far easier.
Well, and we've made shopping guides for each week, so recipe guides for each week, so you can have like no decisions at all if you have to.
Correct. And it's not a forever thing. It's 28 days. And this helps because when you have, when someone tells you, okay, you can't eat eggs or you can't have dairy, that's a bummer. Especially if you enjoy things like, let's say, yogurt or oatmeal or whatever. But when you can do anything for 28 days, it's something you can plan and you can really achieve. And not only at the end of this challenge will you lose weight, you will feel better. Your markers are going to be better, but also you will accomplish something. And maybe if you've never done anything for like a period of time, this is so simple, and the benefits, the risk to win ratio is so high. The win ratio is so high that there is, even if you just want to do like a self-experiment to see how you feel after this, highly encourage it because it's transforming. So Dr. C, where can people find you? How can people get a hold of you? Are you in social media? And, where can people get your book signed?
All that stuff. As far as book signings, there's a couple dates we're putting up. The best hub for things is integrativehealthcare.com. Integrative with the V, not integrated. But if you just search Alan Christianson, you'll find me too. But to punch something in, integrativehealthcare.com.
And, I'm sure you're going to be super busy and you're going to be doing all of the podcast rounds. Maybe in like 3 months, we can gather some questions from Facebook and, maybe do a Facebook Live. And, we're doing all of this all the time anyways. So we'll put it out there and we'll get some good context. And maybe people can tell us their stories about their Metabolism Reset Diet.
That'd be a blast. Let's do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to have you on the show again.
Thank you so much.